Okay, we are live. Hopefully we have, we don't have any sound issues here. We had a few sound issues last Sunday at our 11:30 service, and I'm not exactly sure why, because I didn't listen to the broadcast, but I know that they said that I have one mic that was cutting in and out, and then of course now we've had our whatever our sound system issue is there. We'll see what happens. We got hit. I don't know if the ladies, did you guys notice that lightning strike that we had yesterday? There was one that was really, really close. Well, it wasn't just a big boom. That it lit our whole house lit up. The lightning flash was such that the whole house lit up, and so I don't know how close it was, and I don't know if that has anything to do with what's now happening over there. So we'll see. I don't know. This is the one thing where it'd be really nice to have audio professionals as members of the church, because I'm just making stuff up as we go along, you know. We keep working our way through it. All right. So let's see. What do we have going on today? We ought to do some Bible studying, shouldn't we? Okay, Exodus. We're in the 20s somewhere. I don't know, 20, 21, 22. 22. Oh, yeah, we're going to be stealing ox and sheep. Okay. All right, yeah, we're in the middle. You remember last week we talked about some of these laws that are being set before the people as far as restitution goes. If you do something that harms your neighbor, that costs him something, you're going to have to help make amends of that. Those types of things. We've begun those. Well. Now we're going to get into some more here of those similar restitutions, and that'll get us the first half of the chapter, and then we're going to get to God talking to us about social justice, which is a really interesting thing, because certainly that is such a hot button issue for many people. Whether they're in or out of the church and there's so many different interpretations of that. Well, we're going to see God's interpretation of social justice. But before then, we're going to begin at the 22nd chapter, and does somebody want to read the first 6 verses? And I might be getting up just to check some sound levels. Pam, what number does that microphone say on it? 1. Okay. All right. First 6 verses.
If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, he is guilty of bloodshed. A thief must certainly make restitution, but if he has nothing, he must be said to pay for his theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in his possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, he must pay back double. If a man grazes his livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and graze in another man's field, he must make restitution from the best of his own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads into the thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution.
All right, so here we see just a number of different scenarios that would have been common, probably more commonplace for them. We certainly can relate them to any other forms of theft or arson or whatever the case may be in our world. Well, if a man steals an ox or a sheep and he kills it or sells it, he will have to repay 5 times for the ox, 4 times for the sheep. So, if you steal my cow and you kill it, then you have to give me 5 cows. So, it's a pretty steep penalty when you think about that price. And if a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, well, there is no blood guilt on him. So if you come in and you steal my cow, but in the process of it you get killed, you don't have to pay me 5 cows. So, all right, that's basically what it says. You're free of your debt because you're dead. All right.
But what about the consequence of the person that killed him? There's no consequence for him either, right?
Well, it doesn't say that here, but it's not addressed here in the, There's no blood guilt. There's no blood guilt on the owner of the ox if he kills them. That's what it's saying. There's no blood guilt on him. Right. On the owner. So if you come and steal my stuff,
Right, and you kill me,
yeah,
there's no guilt to you.
there's no guilt to me. You want to, and we have similar laws to that today. Really? We call them self-defense laws. If you were to break into my house and threaten the life of my family, I have the right to put you down. And there would be no blood. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody's not going to try to prosecute me or whatever the case may be, but there are laws that are such that says, you come into my. Now, if you're in my yard and you're trying to steal my stuff, there's if you're not threatening my life, now if I shoot you, put you down, something along those lines, now the law's a lot grayer in those areas. But for us, if you come into the house in this, that is, I have the right to defend myself and my family. That's all part of. If you've ever had to go through self-defense training, they speak very, very specifically about that. But they also speak very specifically in our part of the world today that if someone is going to try to break into your garage and steal your stuff, you can't go out there guns blazing on the person. There you call cops. That's how you deal with it. You deal with it in a different way. You don't go after somebody. Okay, that's a great point that Claudia was bringing up. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. So it means that if the guy doesn't die, then there could be consequence. If you only wing the guy, so that would be one of those things where we see. He shall.
It also says in the notes here, though, if the intruder occurred during the daylight hours and it was evident the intruder meant only to steal, then lethal force is not justified.
Then and again, that's very similar to our laws too. So, and that would be if there's really no fear of harm against your life, we don't have the right to take the life of someone else. So that type of thing. But it's really only if you have fear for your life. And in essence, that's what they're saying here too. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it's an ox or a donkey or sheep, he pays double. So if you don't kill my cow, but you steal it and we get him back, you only have to give me my cow back and give me another cow. It doesn't cost you 5, it only costs you 2. So that's really what they're saying here. So if a man causes a field or a vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and his own vineyard. So, if you go in and harvest my crops, or if you go in, or if your animal goes in there and destroys my crops, I get yours. I get the best of yours. So that's really what it is saying. So it doesn't speak of a monetary amount. It speaks more of trading value for value, that type of thing. If a fire breaks out and catches in thorns so that the stacked grain or the standing grain of the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. So, obviously, if there's a fire, and this doesn't say that it would be even arson, it could be accidental. But even if it's accidental, you'd have to pay for. Note that everything, these aren't done through insurance companies. That this is done by the family. So if you cause something, any harm to your neighbor, there's going to be a price to pay for it. There's always a consequence to that behavior, or an implication of the things that we do. Okay. So now we go on to from 7. Somebody want to read 7 through 9?
Thank you. If a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, or for any kind of lost thing, of which one says, "This is it," the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor.
Okay. All right, so now we see not just the specifics of ox or sheep or donkeys or fire. Now we see anything. If you keep, if you take or if you keep anything that is mine and you don't return it, you have to pay not just that back, but then you have to pay double that amount back. And you see how it says that it's supposed to come near to God. We see that it is at this point it is the church or the leaders of the church of the Israelites. They are the ones that are going to be. That's where the court is. So the courts aren't separated as they are in our nation, where the courts are independent of the church. There they are actually part of the church, and it goes before God, and it'll go before God's word and the determination of that. And so that is we see similar things happening in verses 7 through 9 that we saw in the others. And again, look at breaches of trust that they speak about, and lending. I'm giving you something. I'm lending you something, whether it be goods or money, that type of thing, and you don't repay that back. Those things are. You'll have to make restitution for it. Okay? So now we go. Here now. Let's see, what do we have going on here? All right. There was no sound through the whole liturgy. So the microphones weren't working through the sound system. And though the sermon was good. So the sermon mic worked, the other mics weren't working. Heard none of the communion service. And now there's no sound. So there's no sound on the Bible study. You have sound. Okay. Okay. Because hers says no sound for Bible study. So you're hearing it. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I just want to pass along what we've got going on here. Okay. Then we want to go to verse 10, and we'll read 10 through 15.
I'll just keep going. If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep safe, and it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor, and it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee.
Okay. All right. Just responding to this individual. Okay. So, if a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or any beast to keep safe, and it dies or is injured, now they're going to see if something was done to cause that. So, I mean, it'll be determined. You know, did it die of some other cause, or was it by your hand? Then the owner, if it didn't die by the hand of the person that was holding on to it, then they don't have to make restitution. But if it was stolen from him, then they have to make restitution. If it was torn by beasts, let it bring in as evidence, and he shall not make restitution for what has been torn. So, if you have my cow, and for some reason a wolf gets in and tears up my cow while it's in your care, you don't have to pay for my cow because you had no control over the wolf, unless it is determined that you didn't provide a safe space for, well, you just let my cow sit out there in the middle of your field and you were too cheap to put a fence around it, that'd be a different story. Now you caused the harm. But if you didn't cause the harm, you aren't liable to pay for the damage. That's really what it is saying, okay? If a man borrows anything of his neighbor's and is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. Okay, so here we have, again, and it injured or died. The point being, as they sum up this entire section, is that you are responsible for anything that you have of mine. You are. And if it turns out that there was no control over the damage or death of whatever you have, then there's not going to be a restitution. But if there is, unless you die, you're going to have to pay it back. Okay, and so I mean the point being is that what God is saying here is our responsibility to our neighbor is to watch over and care for them, and that means in caring for their stuff and their families and their livestock and all of those things. That is what it means to love and serve your neighbor. And you're not taking advantage of them. You're not hurting or harming them or coveting their stuff. So this really deals a lot with the areas of the seventh commandment of stealing, of the ninth and 10th commandments when it regards to coveting, things like that. That's where we are. Okay? So now we get to the next group of laws. And there we are going to talk about social justice. And so, does somebody want to read 16 through 20? 16 through 20.
If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for the virgins. Do not allow a sorceress to live. Anyone who has sexual relations with an animal must be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed.
Okay. God's social justice laws are a little sterner than ours are, aren't they? Here, if a man seduces a virgin who he's not betrothed to, now a betrothal, understand what a betrothal is. You know, we try to compare it to fiancé, but it really goes far beyond that. When you are betrothed to somebody, you are married to them. You have made that commitment as such. It's not like today where, they become your fiance, but then after you lived with them for a while, you find out that was a bad plan and you move on. You know, that's not what this is. When you become betrothed, it is really very similar to marriage with one exception, and that is you haven't consecrated the marriage yet. Okay? You haven't had this, that's the difference between the betrothal. So when Joseph was betrothed to Mary, that commitment, that was binding already. Even though they had not had intimate relations yet, that was binding. So this is what he's saying. If you end up having if you now have the sexual relations while you're in this betrothal state before the final marriage, then you pay the bride price to dad and you're married. So it would be, all right, you just consummated the marriage, right? But if the father says, no, you're not going to get her. Remember, we talked about this last week, she is still the property of the daughter, is still the property of the father. And it isn't until the price is paid that that relationship is released. And so the daughter is still the father's property. I mean, we hate to use that term, but it's really, it's the best way for us to help us to understand it, And so if the father just says, no, you defiled her, you're not going to have her, you still have to pay the money that's equal to the bride price. You just don't get her as your spouse, okay? So now we could say, well, there's a guy who says, I could keep doing this with suitors and I can keep making extra money on it. However, we have to remember once he had sexual relations with her, she has been deemed like broken. She's flawed. It would be very difficult for her to be married off. And she might end up being, a single woman with dad the rest of her life. So it really wasn't something that was appealing for fathers to do that. Yet, a father may still make that determination that this man's just not right for you. And And so he would have, he'll still demand the bride price, but the guy wouldn't get his betrothed. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. That, I think, is, again, this goes back to First Commandment stuff. There are no other gods. So anyone that is going to be involved in witchcraft or sorcery or anything along those lines are put to death. Okay? That, of course, doesn't happen today. Today, it's just considered, sorcery, Wiccans, the stones, the spiritual stones and all that kind of stuff, like that place in Butler, that kind of place. Those are just considered another religion or another form of spirituality. But according to God's social justice, they are worthy of death, and so they are to be put to death. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. That's, and then whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. Okay? So, again, God is his form of social justice is really got no gray areas. There's no wondering when it comes to God what his expectation is of the fulfilling of his commandments. Okay? So, 21 to 24. Anybody? Or 21 to 24.
Do not mistreat an alien or oppress him, for you were aliens in Egypt. Do not take advantage of a widow or an orphan. If you do and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless.
Okay. All right. So here now we're talking about not those that are in your family. So this would be the sojourners. These would be the people traveling through the, that are coming through town. This would be those that will be the widows and the orphans and all of them. And you're not to mistreat them. Do not mistreat, because if you mistreat them, the Lord says, and they cry out that they are being mistreated, my anger will burn, and your family will be fatherless and husbandless, because your life will be taken from you. So here it is. He's very specific how we are to treat the sojourner around us. How we are to treat and when we talk about sojourners, how we treat strangers, that type of thing. We do not mistreat them, and that's where he's very specific again. What about 25 through 27? Do you still have the microphone, Ray? You want to just read? Robin will read that in the back. Well, maybe not.
Sure, I'll do it, yeah.
Somebody is going to read 25 to 27.
All right. 25 to 27. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not be like a moneylender. Charge him no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it to him by sunset, because his cloak is the only covering he has for his body. What else will he sleep in? When he cries out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate.
All right. There's that word again. Now, it is really the same word that we have in the New Testament as it speaks of the Christ, right? That word, I am compassionate. Notice how he doesn't say that you ought to have compassion on your neighbor, okay? He doesn't use that term. That word compassionate is used only for God here. But, he is speaking to us when he talks about us being kind to our neighbors, kind and caring. That is a compassion. So he just doesn't use that particular word for us. So if you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you give any money to someone because they need the money. Now it's different if if money is going to be lent to somebody that has the money, but they just want to use someone else's money to make a purchase. That's really, in fact, that's really what banks do, isn't it? I want to buy a new car, and instead of using my money, I will use the bank's money because it's cheaper for me to pay the bank's interest rate than for me to use the money that I'm making at my interest rate. That makes sense. That's how we do things, okay? So he's not talking about that type of borrowing of money. He's talking about borrowing money to those who have no money. I remember the old cartoon shows Popeye. Anybody remember Popeye? You remember Wimpy? Remember Wimpy? Wimpy had no money. Wimpy had no money. Oh, and so Wimpy just kept asking for a burger today that he would pay back tomorrow, right? That type of thing. Well, if I was Popeye and you were Wimpy and you asked me for the money for a burger, I would give you the money for the burger or the burger. What am I supposed to expect in return from you? Or just the money back for the burger. Yeah. Now I could just say, no, here. So I could give to you, there's nothing wrong with me giving it to you, but if I was going to lend it to you and you had nothing, I just should get the 25 cents back for the burger or whatever it was. At that time, back in the Popeye days, burgers were $0.25. So you guys don't have any clue that burgers used to be so. But then, and the same thing, if you borrow his coat, so Claudia and I go to the fireworks, right? And we're going to sit next to each other, and Claudia's cold. So, all right, Claudia borrows my cloak, Before Claudia goes home, my cloak's got to come back to me, okay? It's different if you have a closet full of cloaks and you want to give a cloak to Claudia, and you can say to Claudia, okay, you take my cloak and bring it back, at the end of this, when the weather turns warm again or whatever the case may be. But if it's my only cloak, you need to give it back. Same day. That type of thing. That's what he is saying. So, again, it is just, it's a respect for your neighbor is what he is looking at here. And if it, like it says, if he cries, if you don't do that, and he comes to me, he comes before God and says, I lent my coat to her and she never returned it. God's compassion will not be on her, it will be on me. And then there will be consequences for that. Okay? And then verse 28, you shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. What is this? That's Second Commandment stuff. And so that would be Second Commandment, and it would probably be in line also of some Eighth Commandment. So we're talking reviling God or cursing God. Second Commandment, reviling or cursing someone who is a member of your church, that type of thing. Cursing or the president of your congregation, That would be eighth commandment stuff. And there would be some second commandment in there also, especially if he's reviling God, because that man has been set in authority over you by God. Okay? So that's 28. So somebody want to read 29 to through the rest of the chapter? How come all the thumbs pointed back to you this time?
Do not hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. You are to be my holy people, so do not eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts. Throw it to the dogs.
Okay. All right, so you shall not delay to offer from the fullness of your harvest and from the outflow of your presses. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. So that's the consecration of the firstborn. Remember that he obviously speaks about it here, and that was carried on. Remember Jesus being the firstborn, he was consecrated. That was when Simeon saw him in synagogue, that in the temple. Right? Firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and your sheep. So your first ones are consecrated to God. They are given over to him for his purpose. And so that purpose for the oxen and the sheep would be given to the church, to the people of God, to the leaders of the church. And then they could determine how they were to be used. Would they be used in form of sacrifice? Would they be used to feed the priests and their families? Would they be used to take care of widows and orphans and the sojourners around? The church would make those determinations of what to do. It would be like us if we did a collection here and you were to give, if we were a church that you were to give of your first fruits, which we encourage you to do. But you give your offerings, you give the first fruits of your harvest, you give all of those things, but you say, here, I'm going to give it to you, but this is how you must use it. That's not, it is the church that would be the one to determine how to use that, right? You shall do the same. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. So here the animal is with the mother till it's weaned, and then it is given away. You shall be consecrated to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs, because that flesh would be considered unclean. So here, interesting in that you are to give your firstborn to the Lord, and yet here he says, over and above that, you also are consecrated to me. So whether they have been given over as the first fruits to the church or not, all are consecrated to God. They are all, what does that mean? It means all are his. So it's not just those that are that become pastors or teachers. It's all people that have been born are God's. Whether they've been baptized or not, whether they believe or not, they are all consecrated to God. They are all God's. And so that is really those are words of comfort that are to us. It's not, okay, you've turned over your firstborn, they are consecrated to me, but you're not. You are. You always were. And so by us giving of our first fruits, whether that be the child or the animal, or in our case, the first fruits of the blessings that God has poured out upon us, those are given out as an act of faith. They are a demonstration of faith. They are a response to the fact that God says, you're mine. And so God doesn't say you're mine if I give you the stuff. You're mine no matter what, is what he's saying. We give out of a response to what God has given us. We give because he first gave his son. And he made us his. That's what that's what it is telling us there. These are God's forms of social justice. Notice that he doesn't pick and choose who, this is the best part as it gets summed up in the end. He doesn't say, the Israelites, you guys are consecrated to me, but the others aren't. They're all mine. You're all mine. God's form of social justice is that all are his. And this is how he expects us to live. Loving the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and loving our neighbor as ourselves. That is how we respond to God's loving of us, or God's consecrating of us. He's called us by name, we are his. Isaiah 43. Okay? So, now, we begin chapter 23. Does somebody want to read the first 3 verses of that? We've got a little bit of time yet.
I got you. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with the many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many so as to pervert justice, nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his lawsuit.
Okay. He's just expounding on the 8th commandment here, okay? Don't spread false reports. Do not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. Don't agree to lie, don't spread rumors, all of those kind of things. Don't fall in with the many to do evil, right? Well, I did it because everybody's doing it. That type of thing. It would be like, well, all my neighbors are not declaring their all of their income. So, there's nothing wrong with me doing it too, because everybody, you hear that all the time. Everybody does it. He says, don't fall into those traps. Don't do the things the wicked people do, okay? Because you're perverting justice. Okay. Verses 4 and 5. You want to continue?
If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it. You shall rescue it with him.
Okay. All right. So now we're not just hearing about the things that we shouldn't be doing. We're also hearing about the things that we should be doing. That is, and again, as you remember back in your catechism days, and we had the explanations of all the commandments. The explanations not only spoke about the things that you shouldn't do, but it also said, but this is what you should do. Well, here's what we see here. So you have your enemy. Okay, this is a Hatfield and McCoy's thing, right? This is the neighbor who can't stand you. Keeps yelling at your kids, get off my grass, right? Or their toys go into his yard and he never gives them back, kind of a neighbor. Have you ever had one of those? We did. We had one. Mr. Schiller. I'll never forget Mr. Schiller. So, if he's your neighbor and you see that his donkey or his cow gets out, breaks out of his pen, You shouldn't go, well, serves him right. No, you go get it and you bring it back and you say, Mr. Schiller, yeah, here's your, and he'll probably blame you for taking it, but no, you left your gate open again. You know, so you're supposed to bring it back. You're supposed to care for them. And then it also says, if you see the donkey or the cow out there, and the donkey or the cow, it fell down on top of him. So now here's Mr. Schiller laying on the side of the road, and his donkey's laying on top of him and won't get off. You know, that type of thing. What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to make fun of Mr. Schiller sitting on the side of the road? No. You get the donkey off of him, and you help up Mr. Schiller so that both of them are going to be okay. For us, it's just common sense. It seems like common sense. It seems like the stuff that our parents used to tell us to do, just to be nice to people. But, you know, we don't always do that. You know, you get to be a cocky little kid, and you know, the girl 2 doors down is running down the sidewalk, you know, and as a cocky little kid, I go and stick my foot out, and down she goes on the sidewalk, you know. I did that, by the way. So, you know, and it's not what you're supposed to do. You know, we're supposed to make sure that they are okay. We're supposed to be the one to stand up for them when somebody else does that to them. Yes. Yes, it was terrible.
How bad did you hurt her?
Well, I don't know. I hurt her bad enough that her dad came over. Yeah. Yeah. So, that was a long time ago. So, I've become kinder since then. So, yes, many times. Many times. Okay. We can do one more section yet, Claudia, if you want to. 6 through 8.
You shall not pervert the
Actually, go all the way through 9. Okay, that'll get us to the next section.
Got it. You shall not pervert the justice due your poor in his lawsuit. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a sojourner. You know the heart of a sojourner, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt.
All right. So, don't cheat. Basically, what he's saying is don't cheat people. Don't take a bribe, and don't cheat people. And because, again, to us, these would be things that may seem to be somewhat common sense, but the temptation can be great. You know, the temptation to maybe, how many times did you bribe your brother or sister? I know I did it a lot. You know, this happened, and if Joni, if you don't say anything, I will, and then fill in the blank. That's a bribe, you know? Don't do that. Don't do that. And then again, don't cheat someone just because you can. I remember there was a movie years ago. Did anybody remember the movie Stripes with Bill Murray? Right? Do you remember Dewey Oxberger, the John Candy character? Do you remember him playing poker with the other guy who didn't know how to play poker, and watch him take advantage of him with don't do that. That's what he is saying. And then God ends that with, don't oppress. Don't cause harm to a sojourner, and he reminds them, you too were a sojourner. You were a stranger in Egypt, and you remember how they treated you. Why would you want to do that to somebody else? That's really what he is saying. Okay? All right. That gets us up to the next section. You'll remember where we are next week. and go in peace, serve the Lord, and we're just going to keep trying to figure out what's going on with our sound systems. So